Good evening. It is 5:30, and we're ready to begin the special board meeting. Before we begin, we always ask if there are any public comments. There being none, I call the meeting to order. Roll call, Ms. Colquitt.
Dr. Redis,
Here.
Ms. Williams,
Here.
Nursing West,
Here.
Here, Ms. Swanton,
Here.
Ms. McLean,
Here.
Mr. Skip.
Number 4, executive closed session. Executive sessions may be held only for the purpose of considering an employment, appointment, promotion, demotion, disciplining, or resignation of an employee, or to discuss matters of pupil punishment if requested by the parent or legal guardian. Please join me in executive closed session to discuss employment, appointment, promotion, demotion, or resignation of an employee.
for, I'm assuming basketball.
We are back in session, and we're down to number 5, action item, employment of personnel.
Madam President, members of our Board of Education, the superintendent recommends the employment of personnel as discussed in executive closed session.
Madam Chair, Madam President, I so move that we accept the recommendation of hiring employment that the superintendent recommends for the approval of the employment of personnel.
Second.
It has been properly moved and second that we accept the employment of personnel presented to us. Being that it is personnel, there can be no discussion, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. The next, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn and go into the workshop.
Madam President, Madam President, I so move that we adjourn and go into the wonderful workshop.
Second.
We are now into the workshop.
Well, Madam President, members of our Board of Education, I welcome back Mr. Joe Quinn, our consultant, that's going to continue on our professional development around the book, The Governance Course. So we welcome Mr. Quinn back, who's no stranger to us. So welcome, Mr. Quinn.
Hi. Is this on? Am I good? We're going to go 45 minutes. If you seem like you've had enough, we'll stop. If we're rolling, and again, my quest to not be dull, we'll continue. We'll do an hour. So it's good to see you. I thought it was a really productive session last time. I think, there was a lot to think about. I hope it was stuff that as you were driving home, you maybe kind of thought of in the days after that. There's an Arkansas school district that I won't name. I don't know if you're paying attention. They had a meeting recently where the protesters fell to the floor outside the meeting door, and the police had to drag them out screaming, apparently after the board had asked the police to clear the lobby. Not what you used to think of a school board meeting, right? They are, I'm going to try to be politically correct. That's not always easy for me. They had a policy about what should be taught that was going to be done by board vote. Now, I just wanted to start because this is very current. Policy about what should be taught, generally a district has a process where you might once a year look at a policy package brought by the staff and the superintendent, and they might say, look, we used to offer 3 blocks of this math course, but we really don't need 3 anymore, and we feel that we need more of this. So really, if you have a good superintendent, you are sort of staying out of the way while the staff manages curriculum. Again, I was a school board member for 6 years. I never once thought of myself as a curriculum expert. I think clearly when you get to the point where you're going to vote on should something be taught, that's probably a time for a little self-reflection, because it's really, this isn't me, but anything you read about quality school board operations in America, you're crossing a line there. The turbulence in that community is over the top in terms of it's affecting everything. And now you have a large group of parents who are apparently holding regular sessions on their own to talk about votes to recall board members and to talk about how to do an organized opposition to what is happening. Apparently, one of the issues is transgender bathroom use, which ironically, the board I was on fought about that 7 or 8 years ago. It's kind of funny, like, I think looking back at the board I was on, they went through that very early. I said to the high school superintendent, who's a great guy, one day, I said, so, and I was alone with him, and you probably gained, I'm a pretty honest person. I said, so tell me about the bathroom. Like, what are you doing? He goes, well, at the time we had 2 transgender. He said, I asked them to bring their parents in one day, and we sat in my office with the door closed, and I said, look, we've got a nurse's office that you can enter from the hallway, and there's a unisex door with a lock at the back of the nurse's office. So if you would like to talk about this, what I would like to make available to you, of course you can use any bathroom you want, like any student can use any bathroom, but I have this unisex bathroom that's in a private area. You can come in and lock the door, and if you're comfortable with that, I would like to make that available to you. Both kids and both sets of parents went, okay. And that was the end of a 10-minute meeting. So there's a way to hire thoughtful, compassionate, sensitive staff that says, let's just find a little solution here. And then there's a way to blow up into a massive community showdown that's leading the 10 o'clock news on 4/7/11. So I will say to you again, as I said last time, the way you're working lately, you're doing some nice, boring stuff. You're doing the job, you're having your Chick-fil-A, you're going home, there's not long, crowded, standing room only, angry stuff. I think it's a culture change that you are enacting in front of our eyes. I have a graphic artist, a woman who's great. She is now the fun part. After the superintendent and I spent a year and a half sort of like really trying to dig into what the strategic goals should be. But now we are making them pretty to bring to you in January. We are talking about a website where people can go and they can see the strategic plan. We are talking about updating the crest and some other things so it looks great, and it becomes the nucleus of a package of materials and a website that you can proudly say to the community, hey, this is what we're doing. I'm a consultant, you're my favorite client because I am passionate about what you are doing. You have kids here who don't have a lot. You and I, we talked about that last meeting. We have kids in this district who don't have a lot. Their shot at a better life is in your hands. And that is both kind of really staggeringly important, and we need good people in this country and state who don't want violent protest out there and want to still abide by the fundamental rules of what the superintendent should do and what you should do. And I think you're doing a lot of good things right now, and so I'm starting with that. As I was watching the news the other night about that other district, and I was thinking, man, I mean, forget asking you to give us 45, 50 minutes to go through the board governance again. I mean, some people are so far past that line, it's a little scary. So, I'll probably get in trouble for saying some of that. I backed up 2 slides from where we left off. So this is just, I want to talk about board member mindset. Again, this was different sections of the book we talked about. You unify the community by starting the conversation in the middle. I think there's great truth to that. We live in an angry world, and there's anger on your right, there's anger on your left. But to find that rational middle to start the conversation, and as we talked about, there's no expectation that every vote should be 7.0, right? You should have some 4 3s. You should have some 5 2s. You should have some 6 1s. Nobody's asking you to love each other or vote 7-0 every week, but it's okay to have healthy discussion. Is that doing something that we can fix, or is that maybe the cord's loose? So again, you don't have to be unanimous, but finding the middle. What is the glue that holds the district together? Very often, the glue is sports, it's activities. Who doesn't get slightly emotional watching the choir do the presentation a week before Christmas, and when you hear, Silent Night, Holy Night sung by your kids, and you think, wow, these are good kids. And wow, I'm proud they're here tonight singing. That is, I think, the type of glue that holds a community together. A governance mindset shows unity of purpose. The moral imperative, which again, Mrs. McLean brought up a lot last time. I think moral imperative is the core, which what we talked about. You're good people You care about this district, you care about your kids and the district kids, and you're trying to do the right thing. You know, that's basically what, you know, the sort of rules of society your mother probably taught you in the 2nd grade, and it still matters, so the moral imperative. Deep focused discussions followed by monitoring and action are critical. It doesn't really matter what you pass here. If it's a big deal, you should be following up on it later to say, how's that going? And again, as a board member, you know, there's nothing wrong with asking questions. Don't ever forget that. Like, hey, that thing we voted on last October, where are we on that? What do those numbers look like? We thought it was X, but are the numbers really, you know, showing it? I think that's the type of constructive conversation that matters. This is the slide we left off on. I'll just zip through it again. You know, reserving judgment, staying away. We all have preconceived views. We really do. And you got to kind of tuck those aside when you come in here. Being a good listener. The older I get, the more I'm aware of I don't know what I don't know. And I think that is about being a good listener and being empathetic. I'm in a relaxed mood tonight, I'm going to say this. So one of the reasons I lost my election, we had something racist put in a yearbook, and the teacher monitoring the yearbook didn't quite catch it. So we had a lively discussion in an open board meeting one night about what we should do about that. And there were some families that were really offended. And I said, in an open meeting, one of the things that cost me the seat, I might add, I said, hey, I'm an old white guy. I don't pretend to know how every family feels. And it would be presumptive of me to sort of say I know how everybody feels. And I think as a sort of a healthy, introspective board member, we all got to realize we don't know how everybody else feels. And that's something to think about. And I urged a stronger diversity and inclusion program, and then I lost. Stay grounded. Don't take differences personally. Most of the time, that's easy. Every so often, you get something that's kind of, you know what I mean. I mean, it's a hot vote. It's a spirited discussion, and you know, it's nice to say that you know you can never take it personally. But there are moments in life you're going to take personally. So especially if you're doing something like this, and then move forward and put it behind you after you go through those divisive periods. This is a slide, just the big picture. Focus on kids. You know, like if you had to say like what's one slide that a board does, focus on children, watch the budget, define the long-term goals, which I think we've done a couple of work sessions on the goals with you. I think that's a healthy exercise. You know, it was a while ago, but we did the Saturday work session. And one of my big takeaways that day was something that we did not bring to you, but I think you all made, I think, some great points that I talked to Dr. P later about, which was your perception of how guidance counselors are being used. That it's easy and fun for a guidance counselor when a high-performing kid is trying to get into a high-performing school, but that's not the bread and butter of the job, really. And do you have guidance counselors that don't get too bogged down in that and are still looking for new and different ways to help and motivate a student who is a mid-level performer, but certainly is looking at doing whatever after graduation. But again, a lot of you that day talked extensively about how the district can or versus should be using guidance counselors. I bring that up as an example, not that tonight's about guidance counselors, but that was an example of saying to the board, like, what are you thinking? And in some ways, what you were thinking was different than what we had brought into you. And I think that was a great example of when you have non-confrontational conversation like this, you come out with some things to think about differently. Long-term goal, do what we're doing tonight, build an infrastructure, support the staff with a positive culture. I think that matters a lot. I think you're doing that now. You know, the line, I use it every time we get together. You hire one person, he hires more than 1,000. And that's when you could support the culture and the superintendent by doing it that way. You're, I think, guaranteeing that you're hiring people for the right reason, not because they know someone. Again, I think you've changed all that. When I started hanging around here, you were having, you know, there was a lot of staff chatter along those lines. I think you've changed that. and good for you. And then hold the district accountable to the community. I think that means a couple of things, which is don't be afraid to ask tough questions, don't be afraid to vote your heart, don't be afraid to say what you believe in, because you are representing your neighbors, your neighborhood, your church, your Little League team, your whatever. Like, clusters of people, and you are their voice here. And in this angry world we live in, you can still do that in a respectful, thoughtful way, And I know I'm a big gut feeling guy. Like, now that I've been around you all collectively a couple of times, you don't seem like angry people. You don't seem like, comfort. You seem like thoughtful people who want to do the right thing to move this district in a certain direction. And I love that. Again, it's why I think what you're doing matters. This Bear Bryant quote was in the book. This is something for superintendents to think about. If anything goes bad, I did it. If anything goes semi-good, then we did it. If anything goes real good, then you did it. That's all it takes to get people to win football games. I spent 13 years at Walmart, and we had an expression, a leadership expression: don't give some of the credit away, give all of the credit away. If it goes well, brag about the teachers. If the choir is beautiful the week before Christmas, remember to mention or thank the choir director. Give the credit away. A good board is bragging about staff and bragging about what you're doing, and you're giving the credit away. When in fact you are setting the tone, but you don't have to brag about that because people will notice. As I've said to you again last time, I think your news coverage has changed in a way that, like, I can tell you've changed. But anyways, I thought the Bear Bryant quote, coach quote was great.
I graduated from the University of Alabama.
You what?
I graduated from the University of Alabama, so I'm a Roll Tide fan, and I was very happy to see this quote in here.
Yeah. There you go.
Loved Bear Bryant.
Extra points.
I was there when the bear was there, so
No, you were not.
I was.
Okay, well, okay, that surprises me. It seems like a long time ago. And the interesting thing about Arkansas education, just continuing with the football coach thought, there's still a lot of districts who have ex-coaches and athletic directors as superintendents. I'm not sure I've ever completely understood that, but you hired a doctorate from a big district, and good for you. Nothing wrong with being a coach. We love sports. We sure do love sports. But I just think, again, it's an interesting sort of to look at sort of some things in Arkansas and so forth. So this is a pretty good list. Again, this was in the book on what you should expect from the superintendent and what the superintendent, how he should treat you. Complete honesty with the board. Never surprise each other. Maybe one of the simpler rules of running a school district, and just never, I've been in Dr. P's office in mid-afternoon where he's got a little situation and he's calling each of you, or one of you is calling back in because he's trying to get a hold of 7 of you. I know there's a fine line. Every board member has a slightly different threshold on what you want to be called about, but you should never really pick up the newspaper and be surprised at a story, and you should never surprise each other. That is probably one of the easiest things to do that can matter the most. Superintendent should be focused and consistent, bring the same approach in every day. You don't want to work for people who are flip-flopping how they think, or who are moody, or who are here some days and not others. You want a leader who's bringing in the same routine every day. Great systems support staff and students. And there's a whole section, as you well know, in the strategic goals we are working on. Systems. How do you buy buses? How long do you keep them? How do you set the bus stops? How are you dealing with this national shortage of bus drivers? How are you dealing with that you have to pay them more? How are you dealing with your tech systems? How payroll is done? Those are systems that, when things are running smoothly, a board doesn't have to think about a lot, but they matter a lot. systems. And in one of the focus groups I did early on in this work, you know, I said to the group, I said, what frustrates you? And a teacher said, well, if I have a kid really act out in class, the thing that drives me crazy is I send that kid to the office, and basically the office sends them back. And she said, now with exceptions, that happens a lot, where the system sends the kid back to me when the kid is being so disruptive I'm having trouble teaching. And I remember sort of thinking that's a systems issue. If you're a principal and I say to you, hey, if Mrs. Smith has a disruptive kid, what triggers? What happens? What is the process that clicks the system on? We had a moment the other day about systems. Some of Dr. P's staff is now looking at the strategic plan and helping me with the data and this. And I had a goal that every school's emergency plan should be done in 4 or 5 years. And the very smart woman working with me said, those need to be done today. Like the law says emergency plans need to be in place. And I was, okay, I understood. But again, systems. Are there emergency plans being done the same way by different principals in different schools? I think, as you well know, sometimes the complexity is different schools are run by different principals who have varying degrees of competence, and then you have different socioeconomic issues in each school building. So how are you making the systems work across the different principals and across the different socioeconomic issues? Just, again, systems to think about. Define strategic focus with the board and go ahead and execute. I think having good discussions at board meetings matters. Again, not confrontational, but they should be taking place. What is tactical and what is strategic is in the book. I spent a fair amount of time trying to understand that. I think tactical is, I want to buy four buses next week, and we're going to have to do a special budget vote or whatever. Tactical today, strategic long term. Obviously, the superintendent is a role model of good behavior. I think Dr. P comes across as very laid back, and I think that matters. I think laid back is generally a good thing when you're trying to turn something around and rethink it. I think you don't need a leader who brings more tension to a situation. You don't need someone who is thinking only about keeping his or her job instead of like what's best right here. I think that role model of good behavior, again, sounds simple, but it matters. And I just think that other district we talked about has a lot of things going on right now that you would probably not want to point to and say to your children or grandchildren, oh, that's how to do it. You know. High-performing superintendents hire talented administrators who hire good principals who hire good teachers. That's a bit of a Joe Quinn line, a little bit more than out of the book, but after 6 years on a school board, if I had to give you one sentence, like what I think works, high-performing superintendents hire talented administrators who hire good principals who hire good teachers. Pretty simple. Talent hires talent. People who are only concerned about getting there 20 years hire people who are only concerned about getting there 20 years, 28 years. I'm in honesty mode tonight, and you know what I'm talking about. In another part of my life, I deal with a business who they don't answer their phone or respond to text or email like after 5. I have clients who reach out to me at 10 at night. I had a client recently who needed some talking points redone, and it was like 10 at night, and I was home. I had COVID. I was not well. I was home alone. He said, hey, can you redo this? You know what my answer was? Yes. The answer was yes. When I sort of got into being a consultant, a guy who had done it much longer than I said, what's the advice? And he said, your default answer is yes. If you as a school board say, hey, Joe, can we do this? Or, yes. So again, on this high-performing hires, there are a couple of kinds of people in the world. You know the amazing stories we all read at back to school, like there's the teacher and she spent her own money and look at how beautiful the classroom looks, and she also helped get little Johnny a new coat or some sneakers, or he didn't have this book. You know, those really heartwarming, like educators who live it, breathe it, like amazing people who are going that extra mile. And then there are people in any field, this isn't just about education, who are kind of there for the check. Or as my wife would say, quite sarcastically, well, Joe, everybody's not like you. And as my mother used to say, what a boring world it would be if we were all just like you. So, but again, I think you know what I'm talking about. You have high-tenured, long-term employees, and you have gung-ho, and it's a thought. And then I think the superintendent makes it clear all year what he or she expects, and that should be the basis of the superintendent's evaluation. This is really important because I think a lot of districts sort of miss on that. If by February you have said to the superintendent, here are the 4 things that really matter this year, then when you come back in December to review his contract, you're all working off that 4 things. And then he can't say, I didn't know you wanted that, and you can't say, well, where's this? Because you're on the same page, and I think putting some goals on paper doesn't have to be time-consuming, but if there's something that's done early in the year, or generally the superintendent will draft himself or herself, like, okay, here's my priorities this year. You can call them whatever you want, priorities, goals, whatever, and then at the end of the year, how are we doing on that? Good districts are all about that. That also takes any kind of, a lot of personality or emotion out of the superintendent's eval, and I think that's good. I served on a school board with someone who could not believe that superintendents in Arkansas make what they do. And I was a guy, I would say, look, the market sets any salary. If the marketplace for a district of 8,000 students in an urban area is paying this, well, we got to pay that so our person doesn't go off to Cincinnati or Des Moines. Like, you got to pay what the market demands. But this was a board member who just thought that, superintendents should make far less, which I thought was an odd, because I've always been a believer what anybody makes is sort of dependent on what the market demand is and what the talent level is. So clear expectations headed into the annual evaluation, probably drafted by the superintendent himself, discussed with you at the beginning of the year, make the eval process much easier. And then at the end of the year, if someone says to you, well, you gave him another pay raise. Yes, we did. And let me tell you why. 1, 2, 3, 4. We have a strategic plan. We have a dynamite deputy director. We have a real security director, which, by the way, we put in place and put a system in place before the Uvalde school shooting. We were thinking of like that because God forbid anything like that should happen here. Those are the things that this guy has done and sort of has led us down the road. We have taken the confrontation out of school board meetings. We are out of the news. We are doing the good and routine work of setting up a system that gives our kids a better opportunity in life. Okay, want to talk about his salary now? I'm an elevator speech guy. Like, when I was on a school board, if someone would get in my face a little bit, I can give you 60 seconds or I can give you 3 minutes on why we did that. But elevator speeches are important for school board members because, and again, I'm going a long way around here, the evaluation triggers all of this, a lot of it. I thought this was kind of fascinating. Late in the book, they sort of said to a bunch of very successful, high-performing districts, they said to the superintendent, if you're going to give us one piece of advice, what is it? One thing we just talked about, no board member will ever see anything in the newspaper they don't already know. Casual dinner before each board meeting. That is, I think, a world-class idea. I noticed you had bags of food sitting in here. You can also do that in a room down the hall and have a little food together. as you prepare to come in here. The door's open and you can have a bite to eat together. I think the other thing people forget about school members, you have lives and families and jobs. You have things, you have Christmas shopping, you need an oil change tomorrow. You have that stuff of life. And then if you've had a busy day at work or wherever and you're rushing in here, you're probably hungry. And then if there's a little 30 minutes early food is there for you, it's just easy. And that was like, it's kind of funny, that was like I think that was the Los Angeles school superintendent, a massive district. And when they said to him, what's your one best idea? He said, casual food before the board meeting. Interesting.
Takes care of hangry.
Yeah. Hungry.
If you're hungry and angry, it just kind of goes away. So hangry goes away if we eat before the board meeting.
Hungry and angry is that's a bad combination. Give the board credit and watch their back. I think that your superintendent does that. Another good, again, these are nuggets of advice from the superintendent is accountable to the board but works for the kids. Structured school site visits. I don't know if you're doing that.
We are.
Okay. And I think there's great value. How are you doing it? Like what's your plan?
So there's a particular day that we meet. The calendar has already been placed out on what school we're going to, on what day and what time. And then he sends out a text message or an email, usually the week of, and says, hey, don't forget, I'll see you Friday morning at 10 a.m. We're going to whatever school we're going to.
Good.
And then we do a walkthrough at the school, and then we sit and we eat lunch in the cafeteria.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Those are also great opportunities for the superintendent to hang back and get in the back of the room while the board chats with the principal. That stuff is so important. And then if you have like an alternative learning center, like go look at the stuff that's just not a classic school, kick the tires, ask the questions. You learn a lot, you learn it fast, and it's a great way to digest information in a casual setting and ask your questions. So keep doing that. At tough moments, confront the ugly. We started tonight with a district that's deeply into some ugly stuff right now. And then the philosophical question that in the book, is a superintendent lucky to have good board members, or did he or she help them be good board members? That's sort of an interesting, and I think it's a little bit of both. A good board makes a superintendent better. A good superintendent makes a board better. And I think that's just, some of that's common sense. But again, I thought these were interesting little thoughts. Okay, are we bored or are we okay?
No, we're good.
Okay.
I'm engaged.
I'm going to subtly look over and see how much time we're at. Okay, we're good. We talked about that. The superintendent and the board should never, ever surprise each other. And again, superintendent is a busy person. It's a busy job, and there's a lot in a day. So you and I were in your office recently, and you had some bus incident, but no one was hurt, but you were calling every board member, so you both with each other have to find like what's the threshold of what you want to hear about. So when I was done with the book, I firmly believe that the worst thing most boards do is get the new board members ready. I clearly finished the book thinking, wow, most boards are really bad at this, And every district, I think, has a little different thing going on. I think most districts, you were just elected, and the superintendent says, come on down, we'll drink some coffee, and I'll tell you what's new with the district. So very informal. There's that. Then they start going on the tours with you, and they start, depending on the engagement level of the board member, they do different things. But the quote in the book, how newly elected or appointed board members are brought on to the governance team will in many ways determine how the board will function from that point on. It is not possible to overemphasize the importance of welcoming and onboarding, yet few organizations do it well. When I was on a school board, we had one board member who changed the dynamic of the whole thing. And then she rolled off, and it really became easier. So I was brand new to the board, and we're voting on some budget thing one night. And it was like a $20,000 add-on that hadn't been in the big budget package, so it had to come back as a single thing. And I'm at my seat, I'm brand new. And $20,000 item, don't even remember what it was. A couple of questions were asked, and they called the vote, yes, 7 yeses. And it was a routine, like it was. And the board member beside me, under his breath, said, "Oh man, it's good to have you here." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Your predecessor, we might have spent 40 minutes on that $20,000 expenditure." So, look, discussion is great, but, you know, keep it moving, pick your spots, know what you want to know, but one person can change the dynamic. The other thing with new board members, and I think this is really important, many people join a school board thinking they're going to change the world. And you have to say, you know, it takes 4 votes. Right? That's pretty basic math, but in my experience with a lot of people, they had promised the world that they were going to do this or that, or we were going to eliminate this or that. You need 4 votes. And you know what else, new board member? You sort of got to get along with people sometimes to get to your 4 votes. Like if you're just angry and running your own agenda, nah, you're not gonna get there a lot of days on that vote. So I became like I became pretty good at with a new board member, just like in the hallway saying, "Hey, here's and you know my line," and I've used this I think here before, but I said, "Look, here's how this works. 95% of the time it's July, it's 103 degrees out. We're sitting here with two people in the audience, and then we got 6 staff members in the room, and it's pretty boring. We're talking about the contract to run the cafeteria or cut the grass or buy new books or buy whatever, and it's pretty boring in July. And twice a year we do standing room only." And, and the new board member would sort of laugh at me. "What do you mean by that?" I said, "Twice a year we get something red hot, and it's standing room only. 95% of the time, it's the cafeteria contract," which it should be. You know, that's the other thing I would say to a new board member. Some of them would come in with kind of a social, "Oh, you're indoctrinating my little Johnny." Well, no, we're really not. We're approving teacher pay and cafeteria contracts, and we're not. Nobody really has time to indoctrinate little Johnny. One school board equals 7 people, 7 personalities, and 7 perspectives. I just think that was out of the book. I thought it's true. Everybody has a different personality. My board personalities, I would ask a lot of questions. I'm kind of a policy guy. Like, and if there was I was not a big budget policy guy. You know, it's funny when you look at a board, you step back. Like, everybody has a routine. I was not, like, when the budget conversations came up, I was kind of leaned back in my chair. But when it was like, the band is asking each kid to raise $1,200 to be on the band, I was like, "Hey, hey, band director, let's take a breath here. Not every kid has $1,200 to be in the band." And I was that guy. I was like, let's not overspend on athletics. Did I mention I lost? And the other was, let's remember that all kids don't have the same support at home. I became that guy. So I think every board member has things you become, right? One board member might be preschool or special needs or sort of representing the football families, or, you know, and I don't mean that in a bad way. There are band families and there are football families and there are high-performing AP families who tend to cluster together. We had a parent get a lawyer one year to come before us, and how you define GPA, and I'm not talking the kid had a 1.8. The kid had like a 4.3, and there was some formula that if you had been with us since 2nd grade, you got that much more credit than if you had joined us in 8th grade, and got a lawyer and stood in front of the board and said to us, "Well, my kid's going to be number 1 in the class, and you're hurting her by this little formula." And you know, most board members, honestly, we thought, I didn't even know we had a formula. Like, it's GPA. Okay. So they were lawyered up. because he was determined, as he told the board at the podium, my daughter's going to go to Harvard, and one thing I want her to be able to say is she was one in her class. And then at the time, we had a gruff board president who used to say, and this guy and I really didn't love each other, but this guy used to say, look, the high-performing kids are going to be fine, okay? Like, maybe we have bigger things to worry about.
True.
And there's truth to that.
But it's true.
There are certain kids you know are going to be okay. Okay, just some ideas for onboarding. And again, probably I think the thing most boards don't think about, obviously, hey, come on in to meet with the board president and superintendent, maybe do that together or separately. You know, the whole board should reach out, hey, welcome, hi, I'm Joe. Get them into the school site visits, remind them that maybe drop some preconceived ideas about the district. And then, executive session is confidential. Okay? So, Mr. New Board Member, you hearing me? Because we really mean this. It's confidential, you know. And most of the stuff, again, was a HR package in the executive session, which was generally quite boring. But sometimes it most definitely was not quite boring. A couple of stories I still can't even tell. But the point is, it's confidential. Avoid conflicts of interest. Bentonville was full of people who worked for suppliers. And so it was fairly common for us to say, I'm going to step out of the room for this vote. Like, we were buying land to put schools on. So one night, we're about to vote on a piece of land to buy to put a school on. And this discussion had been going like 40 minutes. And it was an attractive piece of land, and it wasn't cheap. And I don't know why, but I said to the CFO, now which real estate company is handling this that we're buying this from? And she named a realtor who was one of the closest friends I have ever had, who lived in Little Rock. We lived in Little Rock. We both moved to Northwest Arkansas. This guy was like my daughter's uncle, is how close we all were. Like, close, he was like family. And I'm like, okay, we need to maybe, when you bring us a sales document, let's put the name of the real estate agents on it, okay? Because I'm going to the hallway, because I love this guy like a brother, but I'm not going to sit here and vote on a big deal for him, and I'm recusing an offer. And that kind of became a routine. Once some of us started to do it, others, we had an interesting discussion. We had a number of board members with relatives working for the district, which led to some interesting discussions, like, and I'm not really judging either way, but oh, your wife is a teacher, and we're about to vote the teacher pay raise. So are you staying? Well, we're voting for all teachers, not just my wife. So yes, I am staying. I'm not. Again, I am not saying that's right or wrong, but there's a sort of you can have a philosophical discussion there. We're voting for all teachers. So, but again, conflict of interest. Know your moment if there's something that you might want to step out. And then what we talked about a few moments ago, understand that it takes 4 votes to do absolutely anything. I think I told this story once before. I'll tell a short version. Buddy of mine, elected to the school board, busy at work that day, first board meeting that night, realizes he has not been to the county clerk's office to be sworn in. Runs to his car, leaves work, goes to the county clerk, sworn in, and then when the board president swears you in, you know that's only ceremonial. It's the county clerk that makes you a board member. So he jumps back in his car, races to the board meeting. It's his first board meeting. He said later, he says to me, I was kind of embarrassed. This is my first night, and I get there like 4 minutes before it starts. But go to the county clerk, rush to the board meeting, walk in the door maybe 3 minutes before the meeting started. And 90 minutes later, he was the swing vote on a $65 million high school. And he used to tell that story like, I didn't really know where the men's room was, and I was a swing vote on a high school. So this is, again, how you acclimate new board members, what what works and what doesn't. So what thoughts? You okay?
Yes, okay. Going back to in number 4, when we were talking about onboarding action steps, what do you propose, well, I guess in between, the welcoming and the onboarding, what do you propose could necessarily happen in between that time that you, I guess, have questions, need to come up to speed on what's going on, you know, where the bathroom is in the main building without being out of compliance?
Well, a board member can come in for a get-to-know-you session with the superintendent.
Right.
And I think that should begin with, okay, let me tell you how parliamentary procedure works. Okay, we get a motion. That boards are, everybody's a little bit different on this. The board I was on, you would get the motion and then debate the motion. So we did, unless it was really a hot issue where there was too much uncertainty to try to do a motion and then discuss. But you would say to the new board member, okay, you have your agenda. You know, we begin this way. There'll be a bag of Chick-fil-A for you down the hall. When we get rolling, when the chair calls a motion, we have an item in front of us to replace the turf on the baseball stadium. Do I have a motion? Yes. Second. Okay. Now discussion. And I think new members got to get in that groove. So you got to A, do the how it works. B, I would call B, it takes 4 votes talk, heart to heart. And then I think in terms of like, here's how transportation works, finance, schools, here's how we hire, here's why we need a new middle school. Let me walk you through all that. I think part of that happens with get-to-know-you conversations, and it's just simply inevitable that you don't really understand all of that till you get here, okay? And I think the superintendent's got to sort of, like, the other thing the superintendent's trying to do at that point is, like, pick and choose. Like, you might have a board member who's, hey, Greg, I'd like to come down and do another session, learn more. Okay, sure. But then you might have a board member that, you know, your superintendent saying, hey, can we meet before the board meeting Tuesday night? I'd really like to sort of talk to you about how this works. And I think that just depends on the board member and sort of how people want to acclimate. But I do think what you can do is that, like, hey, call, nice to have you, welcome. You know, I am always available if you have questions. And the other thing, the piece of advice I gave to new board members always was don't be afraid to ask questions in the meeting. You know, ask questions. You know, I used to call them new guy questions. When I was new on the board, I used to say, hey, I got a new guy question. Because there is this, every issue that comes before you, I think, there's an arc. Like, the district is talking about or considering, or parents are talking about considering, it's going like this. Then you start to put it on the agenda, and it starts to go like this. Then it gets to a vote, and then it comes down like this and moves on. So every different issue is in a different phase of the arc. Yeah, we're starting to think about funding that. Okay, well, we just voted on that last week, but now we're trying to implement. Everything's a little different, and I do think that's the hard part for a new board member to really understand the routine stuff that's plowing along at meeting after meeting. And again, I think it's up to sort of how you guys can, whatever you can do to make that easier, and however engaged that new board member wants to be to dive in.
I would even take it a step back from that even. If you're running for this position, you should be in that audience for every meeting that you're interested in. Whether if you're coming after my seat, then you should be in that office, that chair right there.
You are preaching to the choir.
I know this, but again, I call it homework. You need to do your homework. So even when you do get onboarded, when you do win the election, when you do get sworn in, and before you're here, you at least have an idea of what to expect. You have an idea of how Rochelle runs the meetings. You have an idea of what Cindy is passionate about and how Dr. P says, you need to stop. So I call it homework, but
I think
again,
homework is we had a guy.
Before you even get here, your butt needs to be out there.
We had a guy who eventually became board president. He sat here every meeting for a year. And I'm going to tell you, like, I didn't agree with him a lot of stuff, but I was like, wow, dude. I mean, no one's going to question your work ethic. He was in the chair before the meeting started, and he was in the chair much later in the evening. We used to go out and do our executive session at the end of the meeting, and when we came back in from executive session, and some nights it was a 2.5-hour meeting. We later got the meetings to a better time frame. He was still there. I mean, to your point, and then no one could question his work ethic. So, but then there were people, and you've seen it, who run and they've never been in this building the night they're elected.
Yes.
Because they sit in the chair doesn't mean they're qualified for the position.
There's Mama again.
You understand? I mean, and it's a strong perception of a person who wants to serve on the board, because you can have somebody out there handicapped sitting every day, but it doesn't mean that they have the abilities to function on a board. So like she was forestated, telling me they need to be sitting there. I don't care about them sitting there, because until you know their mentality, you know nothing. And so that's my opinion.
I get that.
I was speaking to the fact of just,
We know
of just saying, like, hey, Miss Williams, let's sit down and chit chat and, kind of get a feel for
Absolutely.
each other. That's kind of where I was going with it. But, I think that for some people, a lot of laymen that have never served on any board, fortunately for me, I have been on a few boards before. So I understood that I'm only one of a whole, basically a team. So I can feel a certain way, but 6 other people have, they may feel a different way. But at that same, point, that I know that too, if I don't necessarily feel the way one of them may feel, it's all good. Like, we're still cool with each other. Like, and that's kind of what I would like for people to understand, is that you don't necessarily have to feel, 100% in sync with Dr. Paluski, but you respect the position, you respect him, and if you feel a certain way, that doesn't change the dynamics on how I will treat you.
Oh, so where were you coming from? You have me confused.
Well, what I was saying was, as far as, you trying to be funny, but that's okay. What I was saying was, as far as the onboarding component, how do you stay in compliance as far as, getting to know a person
And
initially?
I think the answer is, you say to the superintendent, look, on the compliance piece, you got to say, hey, let's get the communication guy involved, and when is it a meeting? It's a whole.
Right.
That's the thing.
That is the whole problem.
Yeah.
The
That's the
FOI
thing.
laws, if the 2 of you are together discussing
It's
anything
considered a meeting.
about school, it's considered a meeting. And so it makes it very, very hard to get to know other board members and on board.
I-
And
It makes, right. And I'm a huge transparency guy, but yeah, it makes it hard.
See, and Dr. Quinn, my attitudes when we had our new board member, well, it's like the communications for me with her, she would have to first be in the mix to find out the function of it herself. But as far as the role of a board member, well, she already served on boards.
Right.
Presently, nothing of that nature. So your communication basically is very limited.
Yep.
And it's a everyday learning process, just like her. And it's nothing, although I said I want you to run for the position. But what could I tell her? You have to have a passion for what you want to do.
Right.
And that's loving children. If you're going to work in a district and you're talking about children, you need to love children. That's my attitude.
Well, I agree. So I think a good candidate, before they decide to run, you just said it very well, would say to you, what do you think? And you would say, I think you need passion. You need to want to do this. You've got to care. It takes 4 votes. This is what I've seen in my years on the board. But to all your points, we're in a world now, some candidates are going to come and sit at the meetings for a year. Some are going to call you and say, what do you think? and some are going to do none of that. The guy who beat me because I voted for masks. And you know what? He did a year, and they were redrawing the board seats because of the census. And he left. He didn't really have much of an interest in being on the board. So we're also living in this world where you've got angry things going on in communities, and then they'll use my least favorite line, well, you know, the school district's trying to indoctrinate my child. And I'd say, well, why don't we talk about reading at grade level in Arkansas, which is some really troubling numbers. Let's talk about real education. And in the campaigns now, and I think it's less so here than it is in Northwest Arkansas, but the campaigns become about nothing to do with real education. So,
I agree.
but I also think, again, and some of it's the luck of the draw, because I think we talked earlier about one person can really change the whole dynamic, the whole vibe. You get the wrong person, that's not a great thing, but take it a step, who has never been to a board meeting, or maybe never even been on a board, has made no effort to call veteran board members, and then now suddenly they're sitting there, and they do believe that you're indoctrinating kids, and they want to talk about that. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's not really how the agenda works. So, I think I'm going to stop there for tonight.
Oh, do you
I-
have to vote?
That's what a consultant loves to hear. So I think, look, I think this is productive what we're doing. I'm excited about the stuff we're going to show. What'd you say? I think
She just tickles me.
I think I'm excited. The stuff we're now making, I call it making. That's a very unsophisticated term. We're making it pretty, and playing with the look, and we're also going to be passionate early next year about, like, how do we show the community? And by community, I don't just mean parents. How do we show the business community? How do we show local leaders? And I'm going to come back to it. I think this district is changing before our eyes because you all are doing the right things. And now I got to get this guy out in the community more because he's swamped with what he's doing down the hall every day. But he does need to be on the Rotary Club circuit and some other circuits telling the story about the changes that have been made here. And I think that's a whole, and saying, hey, by the way, I brought some slides with me with our new strategic plan. And I think all of that is our continuing evolution. But what I like is we're having these conversations at the same time we're doing that.
And I think that the community, as a reflection, they look at the board and our attitudes. That's important. Attitude, and I don't have to go any further than that. And I think that in essence, we have reflected a sense of positiveness. And I have to give the credit to
This guy.
Dr. P, because had not been for him, what it is, he showed us, our roles. In our mindset, we knew what they were, but we just weren't doing it because where there's no head, you have tangling feet. And so the head came in, and just as this evaluation piece that you had down there, a good leader hire good people, and the good people, you have good principals. From good principals, you have good teachers, and from his good leadership, you have a phenomenal board.
We do. We do.
Not a
We
bad
do.
looking one either.
Amen.
You're all thoughtful and
We are working
non-angry.
together as a team.
I'll take non-angry nowadays over.
I will too.
Does he know about the award?
Angry
that
makes
we're up
you have heart issues, and it makes you wrinkly, and it gives you gray hair. So it's just better to just be peaceful, be civil, be pleasant with people, and I mean, you can disagree about anything and just be okay with it. It's okay to disagree, but it's not okay to be disrespectful.
We're up for an award for outstanding board member.
Are you?
Yes, and hopefully we'll get it.
Good.
We've also been invited, our students, our junior ROTC.
Next
and
week at the ASBA.
At the ASBA, and
conference.
so at the conference next Friday, we'll find out if
Confetti.
we were selected.
Good.
But it was just an honor that we were nominated even.
ASBA is kind of fascinating to go to those meetings. I mean, you got 8,000 students, and you know what your issues are and what you're trying to solve for. But a lot of those little districts, they just want to hold on to every student and the $7,000 check that comes with that student, rather than having quality or how we do thing discussions. You're great. I appreciate it.
Before we go, we've been to 7 schools, okay?
You what?
And had lunch with
Seven
students.
schools so far.
That's a part
That's-
of your little programs. It's 7
Good for you.
So, yeah.
Good for
So
you.
we've
We're
done
going to all of them.
monthly, we have school visits, and then we visit classrooms for about 30 minutes, as they were saying, and then we spend 30 minutes having a school lunch with kids in the cafeteria, showcasing our food nutrition workers. And
Okay.
I will, just at our last board meeting, our board members can talk vividly about what they're seeing in schools. And I think it's so positive for our community that
Yep.
our schools are seeing us together and working together for the common good. And I'll end it with just saying, I always appreciate you, Mr. Quinn, for coming in and engaging us. But I'm so honored to be our superintendent, but I'm honored to work with all of our members of our Board of Education. And I like what you say. We are changing before our eyes. And I think that people are noticing that we've changed our behavior, we've changed how we operate, and it's all for 8,272 students in which we currently serve.
I love a guy who knows to the
Oh,
pen.
we go.
I'm not trying to get any extra Christmas presents here, but I'll just say that everybody on this board has been so welcoming to me. I mean, I feel like we're sisters and a brother. Everybody has just
Which
been
is
great.
great.
And it's right, you can't, when you're with somebody, you can't talk about the issues, but just the part of feeling welcomed and you're part of us, part of a team. I feel that strongly, and I feel like we are a strong team.
Well, and I think that's why Dr. P's a believer in work sessions like this, because although there's a lot of things you can't do, we can do this. And do it, I think, in hour-long increments rather than asking you to give us from 8 a.m. to 1 on a Saturday, and I think that was a good decision. And I think we'll do more of this when we go to roll out the strategic plan and talk about, because I think there's another conversation. I think we're on an evolution here, and how do we tell the community? I mean, really tell the community. And how do we think about what's the right way to do community meetings at night? Mom who has 3 kids that is tired and worked all day and came in. How do we engage her? Those are hard questions. I think it gets very easy and slightly condescending to say, oh, you should be at the PTO meeting. I don't know. If you're worried about your kids having a bath and homework and something to eat, I think sometimes that is easier said than done. And as I'm a little nutty about, some families have more resources to make that happen than other families. Now I'm seriously going to shut up, and it was great to see you all again. You're fun to be with.
Well, that's good.
Thank
Like,
you.
Thank you, Mr. Quinn.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Hey, I don't know what you and Dr. Peter are gonna talk about on your, one-on-one and your ABA.
Are we
This is a
filming?
really good, piece, maybe to incorporate that between the relationship of the board and the superintendent, because that just lays it out right there.
Yeah.
And it will overlay you and your mindset, not just you, but as a superintendent,
Sure.
you need to focus on the kids.
Absolutely.
As a superintendent, you need to watch the budget.
Sure.
As a superintendent, you have to have goals. So anyway, it just kind of reiterates that and just ties it all together. I don't know what y'all are gonna say, but I would love for y'all to add that.
Yeah, three critical components of just how to communicate
Let me start.
board
Uh-huh.
members and the superintendent. So
Right.
we're just gonna share kind of all the things that we try to do to communicate with each other.
To start
with-
that conversation.
With, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Quinn.
Gwen.
Do you get paid? We do.
Yeah,
We're done. It was just